help heal your skin from within. Dupixent helps keep you one step ahead of eczema with clearer skin and less itch.
Hide my skin? Not me.
Don't use if you're allergic to Dupixent. Serious allergic reactions can help heal your skin from within. Dupixent helps keep you one step ahead of eczema with clearer skin and less itch.
Hide my skin? Not me.
Don't use if you're allergic to Dupixent. Serious allergic reactions can help heal your skin from within. Dupixent helps keep you one step ahead of eczema with clearer skin and less itch.
Hide my skin? Not me.
Don't use if you're
today. Hello? Hello?
I was muted. Sorry about that. Hi.
Okay, I was afraid I was muted. Okay.
No, you're fine.
My dad is here?
Yes, your father is here, and it's time to open the doors. Let me just take a
Oh
sip
my.
first, and then, even though it's the same temperature in here that's been for a month, it feels colder today for some reason.
Could be because it's going to be colder tonight.
Well, it is already colder. It's 27
know.
I think right now. All right, let's got quite a few folks already this early.
Anything I should know?
No, not really. Same stuff as usual. Roger, as usual, is getting active right this second. He's been quiet all day. Yeah, typical. All right, I'm gonna let him in.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Everybody's come on in. Thank you very much for attending tonight.
Hello?
Hope you're all managing to stay warm somehow.
Evening, Dave.
George. So it's 3 degrees Celsius, below 0 Celsius here, George.
About the same here, maybe just slightly above 3.
Is the palm tree outside your house?
No, that's Amboy. Where I wish I was.
Yes. Well, hello,
That's the
everybody.
post-
Thanks
Yeah,
for
that's
coming.
the post office in Amboy.
Ah,
Ah, yes. Where our postal worker takes care of the town with a population of 1. Yes,
That's right. Tourists stop there to get the stamp, though.
that's right. That makes it all worth it. Let's see here.
Hello, George.
Good evening. How are you, Mike?
Oh, just fine. Finished putting up our outdoor Christmas lights today.
Oh yeah, you're late. I did ours half a month ago.
No, we used to be able to do everything outdoors in about 2 hours. Now it takes us about 2 days.
Yeah, here too. I do our high rise, right? All our front entrance, so it takes a bit. I also decorate the train at the museum I take care of, so that takes a few hours. So lots of fun. We had our first snow today.
Oh,
We don't usually get snow often, but we just got I woke up this morning, there was snow on the ground. Quite a shock.
we don't have any.
No.
Cooling
Really?
off here. It's
Shocker.
only in the 70s for a high.
Chicago probably gets some though.
We occasionally, but not yet.
Yeah, okay.
Theoretically,
Ours is a little early.
We're gonna get a
Ours-
dusting overnight tonight.
Ours is a little early this year. It's either pouring rain or it's snowing now, so
Yeah, we don't get anywhere near the snow, excuse me, as Wisconsin or Michigan or even other parts of Illinois, but we do
yeah.
get it.
Ours is a little early this year. It's either pouring rain or it's snowing now. So.
We don't get anywhere near the snow, excuse me, as Wisconsin or Michigan or even other parts of Illinois, but we do get it. Somebody might be having their YouTube on in the background.
It seems like I heard that same thing before.
If you are also watching us on YouTube at the same time, you might want to mute that because it's
Either pouring rain or it's
therefore it's running a little later than the other. I don't think it's me. We don't get anywhere near the snow, excuse me, as Wisconsin or Michigan or even other parts of Illinois. But
instant replay here.
I think that might be you, Sherry, actually.
Okay, well, I was just bringing YouTube up. I didn't even
Okay,
know
that
it
was
was
what it was.
connected.
Fine and dandy.
So I've muted it now.
Thank you. Very good. Very well. Appreciate it. Oh. Oh, we've got somebody else in the waiting room. Yep, there we go. Mary Nicholson's coming in. Oh, I'm glad you're all taking a moment of the holiday season out to visit with us tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, about the only thing we got left to do is send out Christmas cards. We'll do that this weekend, I think. I have bought about everything that I'm going to buy, other than maybe a gift card or two.
We got about 4 more minutes before we get started. Oh. Okay, let's see here. Okay, well, 2 more minutes, folks, and we'll be in. We'll be getting started.
So maybe while we're in the final countdown, we could check in and see where everyone is visiting us from today.
If you would like to put that in the chat, that'd be great. In the meantime, I just got to let somebody in manually, so bear with me a minute while I got a text from a very important person who is having a little trouble. So I'm going to fix that right now. Might take me just a second.
Oh, I got sound.
One more second. I'm just letting this one, taking care of one person who I just manually signed up. And okay. All right. So sorry about that, folks. Let me get back to where we are. And
And Dave, are you
yes.
going to start the recording?
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Okay. So we've got some folks from all over the place. Let's see here. So the recording, thank you for that, Sherry. Appreciate that. All right. So we've got folks from Michigan and Pennsylvania and Iowa. All right, folks. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Let me bring up, there we go.
And we have some international reach tonight as well.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I do appreciate all that. And well, today's program, folks, is all about Greek-owned restaurants on the road and elsewhere in the United States. We'll take a look at some of the places we can visit today and find out the history behind how so many Greek families found their way into the restaurant industry after emigrating here in the early 1900s. But first, before we get started, those of you who have been with me before know what this is about. I would like you to put into the chat, let me tell you the number in a second here. Let me tell you what the range is. It's 1 to 42. I have some people just type some numbers in between 1 and 42 into the chat. Got a couple, all right, and that a couple more would be good. If there is anybody on YouTube, you can go ahead and do that too. Feel free to throw some numbers in the chat.
And for those people who are newer to Zoom, you'll find chat along the bottom edge of the screen. And if it's not immediately visible, there's an ellipsis, 3 dots with the word more, and you'll find chat in there. Click on that. You can chat away with us.
Right. However, yes, and you can do that all along during the program. If you have a question, type it in, or a comment, type it in. If I can get to it right that second, I will. If not, I'll get to it at the end. There's plenty of numbers in there, so that's good. So let's move along here. I'll tell you what those numbers are for at the end, again, for those who don't know. And before we get started, though, with the main part of the program, I want to play a video I made this summer. Route 6 goes through Chicago's Greektown, which is apropos to what we're talking about tonight. They regularly sponsor a public art display. The current one is called Hello to Helios. So I'm going to bring that up and we'll take a look.
At the Sunshine Revival, it's a good time religion. Everybody's having a good time on a Sunday afternoon.
So here we are in Chicago's Greektown, and we are here to say hello to Helios. This statue is a pedestal with a sun on top, and the Greek word for sun is Helios. It's also where we get the word helium, like the gas in this sunny balloon. The element helium got its name 153 years ago when it was found in the solar spectrum during an eclipse on August 18, 1868, by the English scientists Sir Joseph Lockyer and Sir Edward Franklin. So they knew this gas was abundant on the sun, thus they named it helium. Now, we all know that before a road trip you need to gas up for the ride, and helium, it's a gas. To get the proper frame of mind to say hello to Helios, well,
So Greektown is just over a mile west of where Route 6 begins. And the road runs through Greektown both eastbound and westbound. I'm standing here at Adams Street, westbound 66. Hello to Helios is the newest of the neighborhood's periodic public art displays. In the past, they've done fish, Greek columns, and lighthouses. This is one of 24 Hello Helios statues in Greektown, and it's right here on 66 at Adams and Halsted. This one is titled Oriole of Helios. Artist Patricia Aswani focuses on the warm colors of the light encircling the head of Helios and features the horses and chariot he uses to circle the sun and rise as it rises from east to west. So it's part of the Sunshine Revival on 66 in Chicago's Greektown. Hello to Helios. I've run out of gas.
All righty. Well, let me do one thing real quick here with this, and there we go. Okay. Well, things have changed over the years, certainly in Greektown. There's always been a gas here, and it still is, I guess. But today, this cannabis dispensary occupies the space of a former Greek restaurant that I used to love to go to. And that is Rodides Restaurant, which was the first one I ever visited when I came to Chicago back in 1980. It had opened in 1970, and Rodides is a grape widely planted in Greece that is used to make white and rosé wines. And another restaurant I frequented, started in the early 1980s, was the Parthenon, which had been the first restaurant to open in Greektown back in 1968. Talk a little bit more about them in a bit and what they did. And of course, Greek Island, which is still here, although it's moved, but it's still open. It's where I first tried the aperitif called ouzo, which of course is it's flavored with anise, so it tastes like you're drinking black licorice candy. It's a clear liquid distilled from parts of the grapes left over from wine making, and if you mix it with a little water, the clear liquid turns milky white, so it's called the milk of the gods. Opa. Well, other than restaurants, Greektown is also the home to the Athenian Candle Company, and they make paraffin and beeswax candles and also sell imported goods, ethnic and religious items. And their neon candle lights up the night on Original 66 at Jackson and Halsted. Now, walking past them just this last year, I saw this sign in their window as they celebrated 100 years in business. But the first 50 years of that was at another location. And here's a photo taken at that original location at 747 South Halsted in the older Greek neighborhood. Now, to give you an idea where that was, here is a map of Chicago from the mid-1800s. And as we zoom in, Route 66 today is on Jackson eastbound, Adams westbound, and Greektown from 1968 till now is on Halsted Street from Van Buren to Madison Streets, bisected by 66. But the original Greek neighborhood, known as the Greek Delta, was further south, bounded by Halsted, Harrison, Roosevelt, and the diagonal street with the Blue Island Avenue. Compared to other immigrant groups, the Greek migration started out fairly small, certainly smaller than the migrations here in the early 1900s from Italy or Poland or the Jewish folks that were fleeing Russia. According to the 1900 census, there were only 8,600 people in the entire country that identified as Greek. But that changed very quickly, and over the next 2 decades, according to a study by a social worker named Grace Abbott, study of the Greeks in Chicago, there were almost 47,000 Greeks immigrated into the US in 1907 alone. Abbott was a worker at Hull House, which was a settlement house that was started by Jane Addams in the 1880s. And this area where the Greeks settled and coming to Chicago was directly adjacent to the Hull House settlement house, where they kind of almost invented the whole science of social work. And Greeks in Chicago, as in other cities in the US, tended to gravitate and concentrate in certain types of businesses. At first, it was confectionaries or sweet shops, retail and wholesale produce, floral shops, hatters, dry cleaners, pressers, shoe shine parlors. And by 1908, there were already 237 Greek-owned confectionaries in the city. And a lot of their business was in supplying snacks for the Nickelodeons and storefront movie houses that were cropping up everywhere. Then as now, a stop at the snack counter was already a part of the movie-going experience. But soon large factory operations of companies like Mars and Brach's and Hershey's crowded out the smaller candy makers, so many of them turned to running restaurants. This was a natural business for many as they imported the idea of a coffee shop that was a staple of Greek culture. But only in the Greek Delta did the restaurants serve Greek cuisine. Elsewhere, they served just American fare at regular restaurants. So now in the 1960s, the old Greek Delta was completely cleared out by urban renewal in order to build the campus of the University of Illinois at Chicago. The only vestige of the old Delta is the one remaining building of Jane Addams Hull House, which is now a museum. It's a great place to visit to learn more about the immigrant experience of the early 20th century. So the Greek residents of the old Delta dispersed to many different areas of the city and in nearby suburbs. But the Greek restaurateurs decided to relocate a few blocks north, establishing a new restaurant row that they would call Greektown. But when the Parthenon opened, the first new Greektown restaurants, they no longer had a reliable set of Greek neighbors for clientele. So they realized they would need to introduce Greek cuisine to a larger Chicago population in order to survive and thrive. So they started going to festivals throughout the city, giving away samples of gyros meat wrapped in pita, introducing the idea of a gyros sandwich to the non-Greek world. And they brought some theatrics to the dining experience.
Awesome.
Yeah, Saganaki, that flaming cheese, the drama of lighting it on fire tableside was a spectacle introduced to the new Greektown. It worked, and very quickly, Greektown was established as a great place to go for a meal of what was, for most Americans, a very new cuisine. So today, some of the original Greek restaurants in Greektown have closed, but many still thrive, such as Greek Islands, Athena, Artopolis, and the Nine Muses. And they still sponsor the annual Taste of Greektown, which we see here in this picture. It's a festival that is held every year in August. Came back this year. It was not there last year, but it's back this year. And they have a wonderful public art displays that I just showed you. The current Hello to Helios and others in the past. And this one is right across the street from Mr. Greek Gyros, as you can see in the background of that one picture there on the bottom left there. This Mr. Greek not only has great gyros, but also Chicago-style hot dogs, and in my view, the best Italian beef sandwiches in the city. But around the country, other Greeks that migrated into the restaurant business ran restaurants of all kinds, appealing to the general American palate with familiar fare. one of the favorites along 66 is the Ariston Cafe in Litchfield, Illinois. Now, back in October, we had the pleasure of interviewing longtime owners of the Ariston, recently retired, Nick and Demi Adam. And here is that interview. Your father started Ariston, is that correct?
Well, the first location, of course, was in Carlinville, 1924. Then realizing that, you know, Route 4 was temporary 66, that it was indeed going to go through Litchfield and not Carlinville. So in 1931, he leased a building in Litchfield and opened an Ariston there. And he had that for a few years, but unfortunately business got bad. He had the Depression, and his banker notified him, you know, you can have one restaurant, you can't have two. So he opted to keep the one in Litchfield going, which he did. But not in the location where we're at now. The location that he moved to is where the Route 66 Museum is now. But he built the new place in 1935, which was just directly across the street. He had the Carlinville restaurant and the original site in Litchfield for some time, but not very long, probably maybe 3 years, something on that order.
Now, was he a Greek immigrant or?
Yes, he was. Born in 1900 and came to this country in 1905. Sure. And he did, you know, he worked in coal mines, he worked on railroad, he worked in an oven factory. And he got a job in Benell, Illinois, in a coal mine, and he was working there. And he noticed that in Gillespie, another small town, about just a few miles from Benell, sure, had two confectionaries. So he thought, well, Benell should have a confectionery, and they did. They opened a candy kitchen in Benell. And then my father was prevailed upon a doctor that every Greek should be in the Greek restaurant business, and he offered to loan my father $1,000 to open up a restaurant in Carlinville, which he did. And I asked my dad, well, you know, what was the first thing he did? You know, he knew where the building was that he was going to have the restaurant. It was a shoe store that was failing. And he said, well, I got in my car and I drove to St. Louis to find a cook. And while I was there, he bought, I think there's 5 or 6 cookbooks that are on exhibit in our museum. And you might say the rest is history.
Why do so many Greek families run restaurants?
Well, I think it's, you know, food is very important to Greeks, especially with families. You can't go into a Greek home without being offered something. You know, it's just, and the Greek cuisine, quite frankly, is pretty good. They've been very successful.
So so you started working at the Ariston as a young man, I'm sure, right?
Well, at a young age, I always thought I should be doing something. I learned how to wash dishes first. But I do remember as a young boy, you know, back in the early 40s, you know, chickens, you didn't get processed chickens. You got chickens in a coop when you ordered chickens. Okay. And they would be stored outside of the restaurant, I can remember. And one of the dishwashers would, hate to say this, over this friend, they'd wring their necks. And, you know, the birds, and I had to chase them down, and they'd pluck their feathers, process them. And thing with beef, you got a side of beef. You couldn't order ribeyes or T-bones or legs. You had to cut your own meat. So I had to learn how to do that too, but I did that at an older age when I came back in 1966. Wow. But I did, you know, as a young man in high school, I worked on weekends, worked as a waiter. Learned the trade that way.
Now, original 56 was on the, the east side of the restaurant?
Correct.
And,
correct. That was a 2-lane configuration.
Yeah. And then when the 4-lane opened on the other side?
That was in the 40s.
Yeah,
I think it probably got opened through Litchfield about 1941 or somewhere in that area. Yeah. And that went directly behind the restaurant, so that the Ariston is located between the original Route 66 and the 4-lane configuration.
And so is that when your dad had the neon lights put on the other side so it could be seen?
Absolutely. Yes, he did. New sign went up on the back, and he had to make some modification to the back of the restaurant and prepare the rear entrance to the restaurant. we've had visitors from 74 different countries. We had the visitors on the first or second day, and they were so excited. I feel as though I know so many people along the road. You know, you've got friends everywhere. When you're in business, you talk to them, you feel as though you know them, you know, first name basis, with so many of them. Great, and we do have that museum now. And we have a lot of Route 66 artifacts. You know, Litchfield has 3 places on the historic site. We have a U-Boat restaurant, a Skyview Drive-In, oldest operating restaurant on Route 66. Just 3 blocks away from the oldest operating restaurant in 66. Kind of nice for a small town like that. And we do get a lot of travelers, a lot of visitors to the museum.
Just south of downtown, I once noticed that there was a big sign painted on a building for Milnot.
Yes.
Was that manufactured there?
Oh yes, Milnot was a little milk product. We had you know, a creamery here, process that and ice cream. But that was the Hauser family. Charles Hauser was the president, started that delightful gentleman. They were a big manufacturing and had milk routes, a lot of dairy farmers. And one of my neighbor friends, when I was a young man, had a milk route. We'd go out in the morning and pick up raw milk from the farmers and then deliver it to the creamery. And they'd unload it there. But they did Milnot. That was a broadly distributed product, very successful.
Chili Man Chili from there too?
Yes, they did that. That was Joe DeFreitas, another good friend of mine. He was a master chili maker in Springfield, and he sold the recipe to Milnot, and they produced it. And they're again still being produced. I don't know where. It's not here.
Did you ever invent any dishes that were served at the Ariston?
Toasted walnut salmon and oh yeah, chicken Olympia with a sauce with vegetables in it, and broccoli. It was always things you like is what you introduced. So we had a broad, extensive menu. This is my wife Demi.
Hi, Debbie.
Yeah, she's a Chicago girl, and her parents too were in the restaurant business.
My parents had a restaurant across from the criminal court building, 26th California.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm down that way quite often just because, not for the jail or the courthouse, but because 66 goes right north of there. So I'm in that area quite often.
Yeah, that's her story, David. Stick with it.
That's right. That's right.
So are you of Greek ancestry also?
I am.
Yeah, both our parents immigrated from Greece. And her mother gave her some advice one time that she didn't follow. She said, don't hire anybody in the restaurant business.
How did you meet?
He was living and working in Chicago.
Ah.
And
how we met. Okay.
A mutual friend introduced us. We were dating. I worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad in Union Station. He asked me, actually, he said, Dad's 73, 74 years old. He's too old to be running the restaurant. We could go back to Litchfield, make a little money, and move back to Chicago 5-6 years from now when the highway moves. Everything, all the papers were filled out, and I was going to be transferred to Pittsburgh because how convenient, the Pennsylvania Railroad had offices there. And I decided that Litchfield was closer to Chicago than Pittsburgh was. Well, and then we bought a house, as Nick has often said. Our mortgage was $100 a month, and he thought, how will I ever get this paid off? Can you imagine $100 a month? And the rest is history.
So Union Station used to work at right on Route 66 up here.
Yes, absolutely. We both have a long attachment to Route 66.
Her father started Ariston, is that correct?
Well, the first location
sorry about that, folks.
was in Carlinville, 1924.
Let me fix that.
Then
Somehow we
realizing,
got stuck
that,
and I have to move it ahead again.
Filled out, and I was going to be transferred to as often said, our mortgage was 100.
Used to work at, right between, right at.
Oh, actually, I guess that was the end of it. I'm sorry. My apologies.
Yes,
Right, yes,
absolutely.
uh-huh.
We both have a long attachment to Route 66.
That was simply the end of it. I'm sorry. Let's see, I believe, yes, Mr. Adam is with us tonight. So at the end, if you have any questions for him, I hope he'll be happy to answer them. Elsewhere along the highway in Winslow, Arizona, three Greek brothers, their names were Quetzaldemus, Pete, George, and Jim, opened the Falcon restaurant on East 3rd Street in Winslow in 1955. They partnered with another Greek immigrant, George Cheros, who had run several earlier restaurants in Winslow, the Coney Island Cafe and the White Cafe. And when food service shut down at the La Posada, the Harvey House in town, the Falcon obtained the La Posada's liquor license and expanded with a cocktail lounge. It became the place to eat and enjoy a night out in Winslow at a time when it was a thriving town with about the same population as Flagstaff. And I want to give a tip of the hat here for tipping me off to the Falcon to Dr. Lindsay Baker, whose book is due out next year. In it, he writes this: the combination of local trade with that of Route 6 motorists led to decades of prosperity for the three brothers. Pete fondly remembered there would always be a line out the front door from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., adding most of the time you would be lucky to even see a license plate from Arizona in the parking lot. It was famous for its from-scratch cooking. The Falcon remained in the Quetzaldemus family hands at the time of this writing. And so that book, coming out next year, is titled Eating Up Route 66. I've seen parts of it and can't wait to get a copy when it does come out. While you're waiting, I would recommend looking for another book by Dr. Baker, Portrait of Route 66, which came out in 2016. It has images from the Kurt Teich postcard archives of places along the highway. The colorized postcards are compared to the original photos from which they are based. It's an excellent book for that purpose. Facebook user Amanda Brenner informed me that the Monte Carlo Steakhouse and Liquors in Albuquerque is Greek owned, and I remember seeing it in an episode of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives on the Food Network. And according to Triple D's website, they say it's one of the coolest names of a classic diner, but better yet, is the unique entrance it has. When you enter the eatery, you can do so through a liquor store. And as the name suggests, it's a fine quality diner with amazing delights that include their tender steaks. But the menu dives much deeper than that. It's half bar, half restaurant with functions in perfect unison. In a sense, you can describe this place as a hole-in-the-wall steakhouse, an amazing steakhouse. A warm and friendly experience, which is to be expected if you are familiar with Albuquerque as a whole. A nostalgic spot with pictures on the walls that adds charm and history to the place. In addition to a great selection of aged steaks, the other popular choice is the green chili cheeseburger. Another important aspect, they say, is it keeps us coming back, is straight consistency across the board. They get the food right each night, every time you order it, in a same timely fashion. And also, and the same Facebook user, Amanda Brenner, reminded me of a place that I have actually been to. I ate there about 15 years ago, the Western View Diner and Steakhouse in Albuquerque as well. Since the late 1930s, they have comfort foods and are known for their neon sign along Route 6 and their longevity. It's an independently owned mom and pop restaurant. It's been around for 8 generations. The menu primarily features breakfast, American, New Mexican, and Greek fare. They say that they are not a cookie cutter chain and truly care about every person who sits and eats and enjoys our food. They serve breakfast all day long, and they're known for their fluffy biscuits and steaks. Now, there's also a restaurant in the former gas station in Cuba, Missouri. It's a restaurant now known as Weir on 66. Back in 2016, a lady named Joni Weir opened a restaurant there that she called at the time the Four-Way, because it was at the four-way stop intersection in town. She ran the restaurant until before the pandemic, and now it's been reopened as Weir on 66, run by other members of her family. The building features one of Cuba's famous murals, and the menu still features some Greek items because, well, she had worked for restaurants in St. Louis. They're not of Greek descent themselves,
but she had worked at a Greek restaurant in St. Louis, and so she brought some of the menu items with her to Cuba, including Greek burgers and kebabs. And so the Greek restaurateur or the Greek cuisine, or both of those things, spread across the country and certainly all along Route 66. Now, early on in my obsession with Route 66, I was doing some research on the highway in Chicago, looking for anything that would show me the history of the highway in the city. For that purpose, I was looking through the archives held at the Chicago History Museum of the photographs from the Chicago Daily News, and I found this one, taken in 1928, just after the West Parks Commission had finished a project to widen Jackson Boulevard to 4 lanes to accommodate all the traffic that was using Jackson, which was already carrying not only local Chicago traffic, but also the traffic for Illinois State's Route 4 and 18 and US Highways 66 and 32. The image has been digitized at high resolution, so I was able to zoom in on this detail back here in this rectangle. And as I zoomed in, the information on where this photo was taken informed me that the cross street with the traffic you see there was Halsted, and this would become the new Greek town 4 decades later. And I noticed this sign on the building that still stands at the southwest corner of Jackson and Halsted, with a different sign now. The large sign on the building said, "Look for Raklios Restaurants." Well, I was immediately intrigued. I'd never heard of Raklios, and also the plural in the bottom word of the sign, restaurants, meaning more than one. I had no idea what it meant, but I knew I would be looking to find out anything I could about it. And for one thing, this was a great find. It told me what was going on in this building that would indeed later be the Athenian Candle Company. So there'd be a new sign there that we greet and see now today. And what I found was an amazing story of a Greek immigrant who was largely responsible for creating the type of restaurant we have come to love. He created the prototype of the clean, bright diner or coffee shop or family restaurant we know today. In his time, from the early 1920s through the 1930s, he was known as the Cafe King of Chicago. His name was John Raklios. He was a Greek immigrant trained in his native land to be a butcher. He came to Chicago in 1897. He worked at various jobs for 4 years, busboy, shoe shiner, fruit and flower vendor, before attempting to open his own restaurant in 1901. That venture failed, but he tried again with better success, finally operating a chain of over 30 restaurants by the late 1920s. And all of those were located in downtown Chicago. In the early 1900s, cheap lunch spots had a bad reputation as many were unsanitary and unsafe. In the minds of many, they were the same as the sordid places that gave a free lunch for the purchase of a nickel beer. In cities like New York and Chicago, such places were hangouts of ne'er-do-wells, or at least such was their reputation. Office-working women would certainly never go into these places. Sanitation was certainly a valid concern in many such restaurants of this nature. Food was poorly chilled. The countertops were made from cheap, absorbent wood, were unhygienic and unattractive. Adding fuel to the fire was Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, that depicted the unsanitary conditions at Chicago's Union stockyards, where much of the country's beef and pork was produced. So when Raklios emigrated from Athens, Greece to Chicago in 1897, he had only $14 in his pocket, and he would later write, I headed directly for Chicago. Previously, I had learned that the field in the restaurant business was an extensive one in that city. In a retrospective article later written in the Chicago Herald-American, it revealed that the 19-year-old immigrant subsisted on water and day-old bread while hawking chestnuts and bananas in the Loop office buildings from a handheld basket. It was common for new immigrants to start in those days as a street peddler. Established restaurant owners didn't like the competition from those vendors on the street, so they influenced the Chicago City Council in 1910 to increase the annual street peddler's license fee from $25 to $200, more than some vendors could make in a year. Raklios was once arrested for peddling without a license, so he did what all the peddlers did. He just paid his fine and continued to peddle. But as we were able to put aside some money, the Greek entrepreneurs decided to take on the very restaurateurs that sought to put them out of business. And by 1913, there was an estimated 600 Greek-owned eating establishments in Chicago, mainly of the chop house or third-rate variety. Again, from an article that Raklios wrote himself, my capital was small, and my knowledge of the restaurant business was small as well, so I sought employment at the Congress Hotel,
a hostelry catering to an exclusive clientele. I became a busboy there and had ample opportunity to observe the method of preparation of dishes, as well as the care taken in adhering to strict rules of sanitation and hygiene. After 4 months of extensive educative scrutiny, I felt able to proceed with my plans. He became part owner of a cheap hamburger stand along Burlesque Row on South State Street. He mopped floors, waited on customers, pocketed his share of the proceeds, and blessed America as a land of opportunity, he wrote. In 1901, he had saved enough to open his first restaurant. He hired a waitress named Mary, who would become his wife, and together they slaved, saved, and planned. The first restaurant was not a success, and he would write that it brought me to the very door of despair. I found if I desired to serve cheap, unsubstantial food, I might have prospered, but I was unable to engage in business which bore fruit of that nature. I was resolved to build upon a firm foundation, and finally, with the aid of a little borrowed money in 1905, I started restaurant number 1, which flourished. In his 1919 article for the American Restaurant magazine, Mr. Raclio summed up his business philosophy. Courtesy, well-prepared food, service, cleanliness, and display are of primary importance. In the 14 years since opening the first restaurant, his chain had grown to 19 locations, all in downtown Chicago. He said, the restaurant I operate are of the lunchroom type. My plan in connection with service is to give patrons quick service, the best substantial food, and at moderate prices. Unlike other quick lunch eateries, Mr. Raclios, he said, endeavored to equip my places with an arrangement for seating and service capable of competing with the most expensive cafes, together with complete menus. Now, this picture is from interior photo from that article in the magazine. You see stools arranged along a lunch counter on one side, table seating on the other. Food prepared is prepared in sight behind the counter in the kitchen behind some windows. It's bright and gleaming with shiny enamel tile and brick surfaces and shiny stainless steel and chrome. The food in Raclios restaurants was served on real china. And this is my collection of Raclios china I found for sale on eBay. In addition to scrupulous attention to cleanliness, Raclios hoped to had used brands of condiments and foods also familiar to his patrons. In the article again, he wrote that in order that my patrons become familiar in a measure with brands of food, either being served or used in preparation of dishes, I found it advisable to display samples of canned goods. Particularly, one can invariably find bottles of Heinz or Blue Label ketchup. Richelieu and other brands of Sprague-Warner products, known for their special quality, and similarly the best brands of other foods, are on my display shelves. Now, there was anti-foreigner sentiments in those early 20th century days that led many of Raclios's fellow Greeks to give their eateries names such as Star Lunch or Ideal Lunch or Washington Lunch, which could camouflage an owner's ethnicity. But Raclios was an exception, and in 1925, he was among a group of 25 other Greek Chicago businessmen that took out a full-page ad in the Chicago Daily Journal newspaper. And the ad said in part, before the coming of the Greek immigrant, you entered the average restaurant and heard no music. You saw no fans. Talked not with a clean and smart, neat boy or girl who came to wait on you. Today, the restaurant is a place of comfort and pleasure to you. And for this benefit, a great deal of credit is due to the Greek immigrant who made it possible. Exactly the same can be said about the confectionery and ice cream industry, to the development of which the Greeks have greatly contributed. And as he grew his chain, Raclios settled on a business model that led to his dominance as well as a problem. It was the reason why today we know nothing about him. The photo here shows one of the Raclios locations that stood at the northwest corner of Clark and Division in the early 1920s. It became his model to lease not only the space he needed for his restaurants, but to actually take out long-term leases on the retail space in the building. So in this location, adjacent to the restaurant is a store. We see here it's Joseph's Ladies Wear. Raclios wanted to ensure that his landlord did not lease this storefront to another eatery. So he rented the space and sublet it to Joseph's. In this way, he could handpick his co-tenants and control the space around him. So in this close-up, we can see that this Raclios boasted pure food, pork and beans for 15 cents, beef stew for a dime, senior specials for 40 to 50 cents, and tables for the ladies. The ladies would therefore not have to sit elbow to elbow at the counter with the men. And here we see as well hamburger steak for 25 cents. And next door, another hand-picked business, a cigar shop, as well as a shoe shine stand where you could also get your hat cleaned and blocked. Now, I didn't know that hats required blocking, but oh, there it is. Now, the Raclios chain thrived, and in 1915, John and Mary were married. But even though they started a family, she continued to work by his side. Mary and John had 3 children, Hercules, John, Helen, and Virginia. And with their success, they took on the privileges of money. Their daughter, Virginia, was christened with water brought to Chicago from the River Jordan. John and Mary bought a mansion on Sheridan Road on Chicago's north lakefront for $65,000 in cash. And Crown Prince Paul of Greece was one of their house guests. Years later, Mary said, "For many years, John and I worked and slaved together. 18 and 20 hours a day, we stood side by side and did our best to make our business successful. Even as the babies came, I worked along with my husband. But then came the Great Depression. The first trouble came when the small businesses that were sublessors started to fail, leaving him to pay the lease on the empty space in the buildings that his restaurants occupied. He tried desperately to retrench, selling one eatery after another. Finally, the last few of his once proud chains were sold at auction to satisfy debts. By 1937, John Raclios and his chain of 26 Chicago cafes were out of business. In desperation, he made what could have been a fatal mistake. As his restaurant equipment was being sold at auction, he had some banker friends of his loan him enough money to bid to buy back some of his equipment, enough to start one new restaurant. But for whatever reason, he did not participate at the auction. He was therefore arrested for loan fraud, diverting the loan from its intended purpose to his personal use. He was found guilty, but upon appeal, his conviction was overturned due to a clerical error by the court. His son would attempt to start a restaurant later that also didn't survive for very long. Now, upon his death on November 19th, 1957, in the obituary that ran the New York Times, more was made of John Raclios' business failure than his 31 years of serving countless customers fine food at popular prices. This was odd, since losing a business due to the Depression was not unusual. That happened to a lot of people. But building such an empire from his humble beginnings, well, that was truly remarkable. So you can look for Raclios in vain today, all gone due to the Great Depression that ruined many people. Yet the innovations he and others of his generation brought to the cafes and coffee shops in the Midwest, well, those live on in the restaurants that copied his recipe for success. One person who was paying attention was a young man named Gus Belt down in Normal, Illinois. In 1934, he and his wife Edith opened a restaurant where scrupulous sanitation became a marketing advantage. He designed the restaurant to look reassuringly clean, with a stark stainless steel and black and white decor that was kept shiny with frequent scrubbings. The food was prepared in sight of the patrons sitting on the stools along the lunch counter, and there was table service in the rest of the eatery. And food was served on real china. The name of his restaurant was Steak and Shake. That first restaurant in Normal was also cognizant of the automobile age, so it was a drive-in as well as a diner. The slogan, "In sight, it must be right," was an indication that inside you could watch the food being prepared, including the grinding of the steak cuts that were used to make their steak burgers, T-bone, strip steak, and sirloin. Outside, it was also a drive-in, since curb service was also offered. You could pull into the lot and flash your lights, and a waiter would come out your car, take your order, and deliver the food to you. And while you were waiting for a parking space, the waiter would jump up onto the running board of your car, and therefore he was a car hop. At first, they were all male. Later, they both male and female. And one former curbside waiter at the original Steak and Shake recalled that customers were driving circles around the restaurant because there was no place to park. They even had a Normal police officer directing traffic around the restaurant. So they started to expand. In 1936, there was a second one open in Bloomington. A third and fourth soon followed. And by the end of the time that Gus Belt, by the time he passed away, they had 15 Steak and Shakes. And then his wife took over and grew it to a chain of 31. Also, and when the first White Castle opened in 1921, it had no pretensions of being a full-service diner or cafe, But they did borrow from the Raclios mold in preparing their steam grilled burgers and other food in plain sight, and using bright white enamel surfaces and shiny chrome and stainless steel to evoke the clean and sanitary look. And soon became a perfect fit for the new auto era. Not just good food fast, but shorter menus and fast food. And one of the first White Castles to be built along Route 66 was in Berwyn, Illinois, opened in 1934 when the Raclios chain was still hanging on. Now, in addition to Greektown, there are many other Greek-owned and operated restaurants in Chicago, including at least 2 in the 66 corridor that are mainstays for travelers and residents alike. One is the great Lou Mitchell's. I don't know the ethnicity of Lou Mitchell and his father, William, who started the original restaurant, then just known as Mitchell's. And across the street of the present location, it was built back in 1923. Lou Mitchell moved it to its present location in the 1950s when the old building was torn down and replaced. Whatever his ethnic background, he sold it to Catherine Thanis and her son and daughter, Nick and Helene, when he retired in 1986. Helene ran the front of the house until her passing in 2015. Today, Nick runs it, and Catherine still comes in to help out. In the 1930s, many downtown buildings in Chicago suffered from high vacancy due to the Great Depression, and so many, such as the one that stood at the southwest corner of Wabash and Adams, are torn down because of taxes on the structure, as well as the cost of maintaining an empty building. Those were higher costs than the building was worth. So at this corner, a new structure was built that was known as a taxpayer building. Small, with just enough rentable space to pay the property tax and stop the landowner from losing money. In this case, the building was a 3-floor parking garage above retail on the street level, and in this space, Miller's Pub opened in the 1930s. And then in the 1950s, Miller's Pub went out of business. 3 brothers whose last name were Gallios, they were a Greek family, opened a new restaurant in the space, and they had just enough money to open, not enough for a new sign, so they just kept calling it Miller's Pub. And they thrived, becoming a go-to place famous for what they called Canadian-style baby back ribs, as well as prime steaks and a few nods to their Greek heritage on the menu. They were one of the few downtown restaurants to keep the kitchen open past midnight, and their bar stayed open till 4 a.m., so it was where you could go to find touring celebrities and professional athletes after their shows or after their games. You might find Tony Bennett or Frank Sinatra here after their shows at the nearby Palmer House Empire Room. Their success led them to expand. The Wabash Inn opened in the same building around the corner, sharing the same kitchen as Miller's Pub, and Vanny's Italian Restaurant opened a few storefronts north on Wabash. So for all the years that Adams Street was Route 66, the Gallios brothers had 3 great places to eat right in the corridor. 66 was decommissioned in 1977. And then late 1980s, the building that was home to Miller's and Wabash Inn was torn down, replaced by a much taller parking garage with new businesses on street level. So the Gallioses decided to consolidate their operations using the Vanny's space just up the street for a new Miller's Pub. And that's where you'll find Miller's Pub to this day, now run by the next generation of the Gallios family. So thankfully, at many of the places on the road and elsewhere in the country, when it comes to restaurants, well, it's all Greek to me. And I would love to see if you have any questions. I see you have quite a few comments. Who came up with the name Ariston, Greek word, and it means the best. And it was first food taken in the morning before work, breakfast, and they also use for dinner, lunch, and meal. So basically for every meal, and Kathy says you're welcome to the person who asked. Any other questions anybody have, feel free to unmute yourself. I'll be happy to answer them or see if anybody has a question or a comment for Mr. Adam as well. Since you're here with us tonight, thank you for coming, Nick.
I was wondering, and he may have said it in the beginning, but Mr. Adams, are you still running Ariston Cafe?
Nick, do you want to unmute yourself and answer, or I know the answer, but I'll let you say it if you want to. Well, the answer is that he's retired. He retired, and there's another set of people who run other restaurants in Litchfield that are currently still running the Ariston.
Okay, is Ariston Cafe still open?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it is definitely still open. And as far as I know, last time I was there, they haven't changed much. There wasn't much to change. It was good the way it was.
So they didn't change anything.
Pretty cool.
They hardly change the menu at all, and they still have the original recipes they're using.
Yeah. And it's still excellent. But I do know that Nick does work a lot at the museum right across the street. So he's in town to greet tourists quite often.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome, Kathy. Well, as you're thinking about any potential questions you might have, let me just say that if you're interested, tomorrow night, I'll be doing a Zoom presentation for Prairie Trails Public Library. So it'll be on Zoom, and I'm going to put into chat right now the information about that and one other one. There we go. So tomorrow night, I'm doing Route 66 on a tank of gas, the Mother Road in Illinois. So you can, I believe they'll allow anybody to register who wants to, so I put that information in the chat. If you'd like to join me tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the Prairie Trails Library Zoom. And this coming Saturday at 2 o'clock, I'm doing a presentation for the Joliet Public Library as well. And that's, there we go. And I have that in the chat as well. It's 2 o'clock on Saturday the 11th, and that's called Home for the Holidays, Our Travels and Traditions. So that's coming up this week. And if you want to join me in 1 month from today, on this January the 6th, I'm doing a program I'm calling The Myths of Route 66, Misinformation on the Mother Road. I recently did had some conversations with people on Facebook trying to inform them that some of the things that they posted just happened to be incorrect. And that can happen. I mean, there's all sorts of information that gets corrected from time to time. So I'm just going to do a little bit about a few of the myths of 66 next month. And with that, if anybody here has any information about things they've seen or written that's turned out to be incorrect, or if when you took the road and it was different than you expected, so therefore a little bit out of something that was out of the ordinary, different than what you thought, I would be interested in having you send me an email about that, and you could join the conversation. I'd like to have a little more roundtable about it on January the 6th. And if you do go to my website, you can get information about the tours I do here in Chicago with insights to go. You can find out at route66chicago.com. Most days, if somebody signs up for it, I'll be happy to put on my winter coat and go out and give you a walking tour of 66 in downtown Chicago. And there's also an app for your phone where I've done a guided tour for your phone at playeatlas.com. You can download that for a guided tour from your telephone, from your cell phone. And you can find more about my books at my website, windycityroadwarrior.com. And those numbers that you put into the chat at the beginning, well, I'm from a randomized list of everybody who signed up today. I'll be sending out information tomorrow about the door prizes that you won, thanks to the numbers that were picked at the beginning. So the door prizes for today is a glass from the Miller's Pub, and or a cookbook from the Route 66 Association of Illinois, Recipes Along 66 from Illinois, and a book called Road Food, a coast-to-coast guide to 500 of the best barbecue joints, lobster shacks, ice cream parlors, highway diners, and much more. So those will be the door prizes for the lucky folks from today. There's always a door prize, set of door prizes on every one of these every month if you haven't been with me before. With that, I still don't see any other questions. Does anybody have any comments before we go? And if not, well, I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. Keep the home fires burning, folks, enjoy yourselves for your holiday. And if I see you tomorrow night or on Saturday, that'd be great. Otherwise, I'll see you in the new year. So, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Christmas, everybody.
Thanks, thanks, Dave. Enjoyed that. Have a good time. See you. Hopefully, see you next year.
All right, absolutely.
Take care and have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Kathy. You too.
Take care, Mike. Say hi to Sharon for me.
Yes, Roger. Here. All right, I got everybody out of the room except you and me.
Hello.
Hello.
Are you still recording?
I'm going to stop the recording right now.